Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're returning. Thank you so much. My name is Laura and this is Cultery Nonsense. This is a channel where we talk about obsessions, cults, anti-MLM things, and I also do cooking videos because that's a personal obsession of mine. I really enjoy things in the kitchen. So without further ado, today we're going to be talking about the BITE model. The BITE model was created by Stephen Hassan, who was actually in the group The Moonies. You know, he was a cult member, and then after he got out, he helps deprogram people. So this was created by someone who has experienced a lot of these things himself, and now professionally works to help get people out. So I think it was really created by someone who has professional and personal knowledge. And it just so happens that recently I made these little oat energy bites, which I think are really cute. I'll show you one here. This is the double chocolate variety. But I just thought it would be fun to have these little oat bites, talk about the BITE model, and if these look like a quick, easy snack you might enjoy, I will put a link up above here. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick thank you to some of the people who just subscribed to me. I'm just started making videos, so it's really fun seeing that I've gained a couple people already who want to watch the things that I'm making. And I hope that this video you'll find interesting because it really helps explain why we talk about things like MLMs being like cults. Sometimes when we think of the word cult, we just think of people, you know, standing around in robes doing a scary ritual or something. And of course, those types of groups exist. However, I think that the term cult really shouldn't be that stigmatized to an extreme, you know, event or group, because there are a lot of things that we do in our daily lives that we might not realize have a certain level of control over us, and a lot more people than you think might actually be part of a group that has this type of control or hold over their lives. So the BITE model is a tool that was created to help show the different types of influence that these groups can have over your life. BITE is an acronym. It stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. So all of these different areas, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control, are different areas of your life in which someone can exert undue influence or control. I believe if you have more than 4 of these boxes ticked in any of these categories, you know, 4, 4, 4, and 4, it kind of qualifies you for being in a group that treats its members like a cult might, because there's undue influence or control. It's not just extreme religious groups that fall into this category. This is why we talk about MLMs kind of being like cults. Some people even think, you know, you might get too involved in like a political party, and that can be kind of like a cult. Sometimes it's human nature to want to try to fit in and be a part of these groups, and sometimes we don't understand how much of ourselves we're giving over and how much we really might be being controlled. Especially once you're on the inside and you've kind of been indoctrinated, you probably won't see it because these things kind of become normal. It becomes normalized to have this level of control over your life and your free time, your thoughts. So I want to get started going over each of the different areas of control in the BITE model. Behavior has the most aspects involved with it. So the first one is regulating an individual's physical reality. The second one is dictating where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates. So this can be done in a number of places. So like if, you know, a leader of your MLM, for example, is telling you, don't associate with haters. Or, you know, if you're in Scientology or something and they declare someone a suppressive person and you're supposed to disassociate with them. A lot of groups won't have you interact with people from a different group who might give you opposing information or, you know, might shed light on some of the control tactics that are being used against you. If a group isolates you and tells you who you're allowed to talk to, that keeps you inside the bubble of control longer. Another one is when, how, and with whom the member has sex. This was kind of a big thing in Nexium, the kind of MLM cult. A lot of people call it a sex cult because there was some of that involved with it. The the leader there was definitely controlling those aspects of members' lives. Control types of clothing and hairstyles. I will say that this kind of fits into many religions more broadly. You know, a lot of them have kind of a modesty culture. However, when it's taken to the point where, you know, you might get seriously punished for not adhering to specific, you know, clothing or hairstyle rules, that is when it gets to the point where, you know, it might be kind of out of control. And as I said before, MLMs can be guilty of this one as well. I know people in Amway were always expected to have, you know, certain hairstyles, like men were supposed to be clean shaven and women were supposed to wear skirts and dresses, and they're all supposed to wear professional attire. And the way that they presented this behavioral control as well was a little bit more sophisticated, because they would use manipulation tactics by saying things like, well, only successful people do this. And so it wasn't out and out, you have to do this or we're going to disown you. But it was a way that was clever because it made people adhere to this type of behavioral control without even necessarily realizing that it wasn't their own choice. Regulating diet, food and drink, hunger or fasting. Fasting is another big one. Sometimes food deprivation can be used as, punishment or penance. Again, if we look at the Nexium example, a lot of the women were put on, crash diets where they could barely eat anything. Again, a lot of religions have components of fasting. However, if it's really taken to the extreme end, again, that type of behavioral control really affects your life and the decisions you make. If you're not getting the proper nourishment for your body, it can be really damaging. Now, this next one is another big one too, manipulation or deprivation of sleep. Because if you do not get enough sleep, you really cannot make the type of rational decisions that you might have otherwise. If you're in a group that keeps you busy 24/7 and you're only running on a couple hours of sleep, you're not going to have full functional thought available to you because your body is just not handling the situation that you're in. So a lot of people don't even realize how crazy their lives have become because they're being sleep deprived. So sleep deprivation and making sure people are always busy and always doing things is kind of a hallmark of cults and MLMs as well. It's that always hustle mentality. So you don't even have time to stop and think about, what am I doing? Does this make sense? Is this good for me? Because it's just go, 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 go. The next one is financial exploitation or dependence manipulation. So again, this is another big one for MLMs. A lot of the time, you're not in a good financial situation when you start, and they deplete you of resources. So you're in an even worse financial situation when you're in it or afterwards. And because they've put you in a vulnerable state, they also make you think that you need this company to get back to where you were before. Another one, restrict leisure, entertainment, or vacation time. This is another big one that we see as well in MLMs. They talk all the time about time freedom and working in pockets of time. However, they really do want you to work constantly, and they're not okay with you taking breaks or vacation when you're not working on your business. So there is another one as well, major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. This is a big one too. If you have to be on all sorts of team calls all the time, checking in with your upline forever, or if you're in, a church group, you have to meet every single day or a couple times a week, or you have to be held accountable to people. If you're taught to really get involved in the cycle of toxic positivity and constantly be listening to self-help stuff that really just kind of re-indoctrinates you into the mindset of hustle, 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 grind, grind. These types of things as well, this repeated indoctrination, just further cements your mindset and the kind of groupthink mentality, and that your group can do no wrong, or it's the best, or it's really great, because you're constantly being indoctrinated. Wow, I forgot how good the chocolate one is. Oh, so that one also really goes along with discouraging individualism and encouraging groupthink. Going with the mindset of the group, not trusting your own thoughts because you have to do what the group says and the group is right and the group knows what to do. Permission required for major decisions. That's another big one as well. If you have to ask permission to go on vacation, or like permission to stop working for a day, or permission to, I don't even know. Like I said, get a haircut. That's really invasive into your life. You should be able to make these types of big decisions for yourself. Here's another one. Thoughts, feelings, and activities of self and others reported to superiors. So this is a way to really make sure that you get the most out of indoctrination. Because if you report to your superior that, I'm having a really hard time with this today, and, I'm not so sure of this, then they know that they have to double down their efforts to get you back in, as well as policing other people. There are examples of this all the time, especially of people in more extreme religious communities like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, especially at like BYU, the Mormon College. The honor code pretty much requires you to snitch on anyone else who's doing something wrong, because if it gets found out and someone knows that you knew, you will get in trouble as well. So all of these reporting of thoughts and actions to your superiors and whatever group you're in, as well as those of others, keeps that level of control even more tightly focused, because you are required to, report your own thoughts and actions. But it also helps keep you in line if you think that everyone in your community is keeping tabs on you as well. Another one is rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. So this is another thing in MLMs. A lot of the time you get rewarded for stuff. And I would say in general, in extreme control groups like Nexium, for example, there were, punishments and penance that they had to do for all sorts of slip-ups or mistakes, or they had this thing called collateral. So like, for example, if you said, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, and if I don't lose 20 pounds, I have to give you $500, they would take that and you wouldn't get your money back. So there would be some type of punishment for not reaching your goals or doing what you said you were going to do. The next one, impose rigid rules and regulations. If you couldn't tell by all this behavioral control already, these types of rigid rules are in a whole bunch of groups. So this one is pretty extreme. You're not really going to come across this in anything short of kind of like a full-blown religious, completely indoctrinated cult. And that's, punish disobedience by beating, torture, burning, cutting, all of those terrible physical punishments. Threaten to harm family or friends. This is something that is done. I would say you could make an example of this through Scientology, because they're often pretty litigious. So even if it's not physical harm, a lot of the time, they might financially harm you or threaten that they're going to, follow you and make your life miserable. Another one here, unfortunately, it has to do with sexual assault. There was forced intercourse in Nexium that a lot of women didn't really feel like they could have given consent for. Instill dependency and obedience. That's huge in a bunch of these groups. And finally, again, encourage or engage in corporal punishment. This is actually something that some more religious fundamental groups really enjoy. Like Debbie and Michael Pearl, who I might do a video on at one point, are religious fundamentalists, and their book, I believe, is called To Bring Up a Child or something like that. They pretty much just straight up recommend beating your kids because it's good, and the Bible says that it's good. So they have instructions for like harming your kids as young as like a couple months old. So that's something. So moving on, like I said, behavior had the most to information control. Deception is a big one here. So deliberately withholding information, distorting information to make it more acceptable, or systematically lying to the cult member. This is a big thing in a lot of groups, especially if they want you to join. They might not tell you the more unsavory details, or they might manipulate information to make you think that it's something else when it's not. This is another huge one. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, other media, critical information, other former members, keeping members busy so they don't even have time to think and engage. Control through cell phone with texting, calls, or internet tracking. This is a huge thing in, religious cults and MLMs. Again, if they want you to stay positive. Don't read what the haters are saying. They're just haters. You don't have to listen to any of them. Really kind of controlling where you get the information and making sure that you don't see negative things is another way that they can keep you involved in the group. Because if you're told that all of that stuff out there on the internet is just lies and people who have been disenchanted or couldn't cut it, or, are actively trying to bring your group down because they're hateful or spiteful or a suppressive person, all of those things make it so that you're less likely to actually, search out and engage with the information. And so you won't learn the truth. Another one is compartmentalizing information into outsider versus insider doctrines. So ensuring that information is not freely accessible. So for example, I think this one is really big with some aspects of Mormonism that you kind of heard whispers of a long time ago, talking about things like, the sealing garments or celestial kingdoms and all of those weird things that a lot of people would tell you, no, that's not true. We don't do that. And now that we have the internet and a lot of people from that community are speaking out and being able to engage with each other and saying, actually, yes, that is true. It was the type of information that you didn't get unless you were at the very, unless you were really in. The same thing with Scientology as well. So that goes into this next part, controlling information at different levels and missions within the group. So when you first start out, they might not tell you all of the stuff that we might be considered, crazy or weird. But they start off with getting you really involved in the group, thinking that they're right, thinking that they can do no wrong. And the more you get indoctrinated, the more and more they layer on information that might seem crazy to outsiders. But you've already come this far and you've already believed this much. So one more incremental step doesn't seem that weird when you've already gone through so many different layers inside these groups. And then also, allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. So, having leaders disperse that information to whoever they choose is another big thing. Encourage spying on other members. Like I said, it helps control people if you think that, someone could be watching your every step. The next one is extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, movies, and other media. Misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. So this is a thing, a whole bunch of these groups produce their own media so that you can, watch or listen or read to those things when you're inside the group. And again, it just reinforces the indoctrination that they want and keeps you from going to outside sources for other information. Misquoting stuff in MLMs is also a huge thing that really annoys me. I think there's one statistic that they have that's something like, they say it's something like 80% of female millionaires are in MLMs or something. Oh yeah, so this is one that's even been changed further. I think the original thing was 80% of successful people in network marketing are women. So first of all, you've already got the slice of successful, which is probably like 2% of all people. And so 80% of those are women, which isn't actually that hard because I think like 75% of people in MLMs in general, all of them are women. And so that was taken to be 80% of successful women are in network marketing. And then at some point I've heard like 80% of female millionaires are in network marketing. So it just gets changed and manipulated and parroted by a bunch of people. And then the last thing in information control is unethical use of confession. So information about sins used to disrupt and or dissolve identity boundaries, withholding forgiveness or absolution, or manipulation of memory, possible false memories. Moving on to thought control, the first thing is requiring members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. So anything else, false. The only true thing is what I'm getting from the group. Adopting the group's map of reality as reality, instilling black and white thinking, decide between good versus evil, which I'll also think kind of ties into black and white, and then organize people into us versus them or insiders versus outsiders. I think the funny thing about this too is that The world is so full of nuance. There are a couple things that we would, yes, consider undeniably good or undeniably bad, but so much of the world is shades of gray. You know, you have to take in people's motivations, their circumstances, the outcomes. So many things go into making up what we would consider, you know, some things being good or bad. Nothing or very few things in this world are completely black and white. Your culture might change it, your age, what you've been brought up to believe. So I find it very funny that in this thought control, it talks about encouraging black and white thinking when we have certain people like Bethany from Girl Defined, a fundamentalist Christian, talking about how I only want things to be black and white. I want the Bible to tell me what's good and what's bad, when we know that that's not exactly how the world works. So I just find it very funny that a thing that she talks about, what her own mentality is in here in the thought control portion of the BITE model. Anyway, another thing is changing a person's name or identity. A lot of the time when you get into new groups, you might be referred to by a new name that they give you, or by your rank, or your identity really becomes subsumed in this group and you're not really you outside of it anymore. You're just kind of your role in this organization. Another one is use of loaded language and cliches, which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. Moving on, encouraging only good and proper thoughts. This is something that's really big in MLMs too. They talk about manifesting and how it's up to you, that if you think good things will come to you. But then if something bad happens, it's also your fault because you weren't thinking good things enough. And it also encourages you, if you're being discouraged, to go back and listen to some toxic positivity bullshit that makes you just keep drinking the Kool-Aid. I really don't like this idea of, you know, only thinking good and proper thoughts. Don't let anything negative come into your head, because then it's your fault if you fail. That's a huge thing in MLMs. This next one is interesting. Hypnotic techniques are used to alter mental stages, undermine critical thinking, and even to age regress the member. Stuff like this is done in some kind of like woo-woo cult areas. Stuff like this neural programming was done in Nexium as well. So we've seen that in different areas, you know, people trying to get into your head and manipulate your thought processes. Along with that, memories are manipulated, false memories are created. We know that the memory isn't just like a file cabinet where you go back and, you know, pick out what happened on a certain day. Memories are pretty much recreated by the brain as they happen. And so this was a huge issue going on in the Satanic Panic as well, because people were interviewing children and not doing it properly. And, you know, they thought they had to have been abused. And a lot of people actually implanted false memories of abuse in these children because they interviewed them so poorly and were convinced that something bad had happened to them. And so then some of these children, you know, went into their adulthood thinking that they had been potentially abused by parents, and really none of it had happened. But it just goes to show that you really can manipulate memory. Our thoughts are not a strict record of what happened on what day. They're constantly altered and recreated by the brain, and they can be tampered with. Oh, this is another one as well. Teaching thought stopping techniques, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking, even things like chanting and meditation, praying, singing, speaking in tongues. All of those things that you might teach yourself to do when you encounter negative thoughts stop you from processing maybe the truth of those negative thoughts, and just keeps you inside your bubble of positive only thinking, which is really just the thinking that the group wants you to have. And then again, rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism. There is no constructive criticism when you're in a group like this. It's their way or the highway. They don't take any, you know, rational thinking or critical thinking a lot of the time. Again, forbidding critical questions about the leader, doctrine, or policy allowed, because a lot of the time, if you try to poke holes in these things, you can. So asking those questions is forbidden. Labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. Again, really discouraging people from looking outside of the group for new information. And finally, instilling a new map of reality, basically saying, this is the way the world is, this is how it works, this is your place in it, and that entire framework is created by the group that you're in. Finally, we go to emotional control, which I think is also important. So the first thing here is you could manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. This was done in Nexium as well. They didn't really let them have negative emotions. They were told that they were, being selfish, or, anger might not serve you or whatever, or you shouldn't be sad about something. Emotions are valid. You can feel them, point blank, and sometimes it is true. If you have things in your past that really cause you to have anger, that might not serve you all the time. It might cause you to lash out at people, but you shouldn't completely shut down emotions. You should learn how to process them in a healthy way. Another thing here is teach emotion stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, or doubt. Again, not even allowing you to think these negative things. Because if you process how you're actually feeling and you realize, I feel bad about this, that doesn't help the group because it might make you want to leave. The next thing here is making the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. This goes back to that kind of manifesting toxic positivity thing that I was talking about. Anything good that happens is, due to the group, but anything bad that happens is due to you. And it really places all of that blame on the individual inside the group. And this type of psychological tactic is a lot of the reasons why when people fail at MLMs, they don't report them as a scammy business because they've been taught to believe that it's their fault they failed. It was not inherently the structure of the business which was designed for them to fail. This next one here is promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness. This is a huge one, not living up to your potential, your family's deficient, your past is suspect, your affiliations are unwise, your thoughts, feelings, or actions are irrelevant or selfish, different types of social or historical guilt. Because if you feel guilty as well, you'll want to do more to prove yourself or cement your place in these organizations. You might not really think about, are my guilty feelings valid? Because you're just feeling so much guilt that you want to prove yourself and double down. Another thing is instilling fear. And this is a big one in religion too. If I leave this religion, I'm going to hell, That's pretty much the biggest thing. Or people on the outside are enemies, or they will lead me down a wrong path. Or if I leave this group, then I'm not going to have the life that I wanted. And conversely, there could be the fear of losing people inside the group as well. If this entire community has become your life, you could be very scared about, if you leave, they may shun you. You may lose your family. You may lose your loved ones. You'll lose that group that you love if you leave this organization or this faith, because everyone's loyalty is to that organization. It's not to you. Almost to the end here. Another thing is extremes of emotional highs and lows. So, one moment they might be praising you and love bombing you and making you feel amazing and accepted and incredible. And no wonder you want to join this group. It's the best feeling in the world. And the next minute they could be denigrating you. Maybe you've sinned. Maybe you've done something wrong. Maybe you said something that could be conceived negatively about the group. Whatever it is, it puts you on this emotional roller coaster where you never really know what to expect. And in this way, I think it functions almost like an abusive relationship where a lot of the time at the beginning, you're riding a high, and then no matter how low the low gets, you're just trying to get back to that initial point of feeling amazing. And that's what you're striving for in a lot of these groups, getting back to the good feeling when you don't realize that, 90% of the time, you might feel awful because you're just focusing on trying to get back to the good. This next one here, ritualistic and sometimes public confession of sins. This is something done to keep you kind of accountable as well, I guess, or, bring you down a peg. And then the very last thing here is phobia indoctrination. So kind of teaching you irrational fears about leaving or questioning the leader's authority. They might tell you that you'll have no happiness or fulfillment outside the group, or that there will be terrible consequences if you leave. Or again, shunning people who leave. So actually seeing those consequences come about when someone leaves, and then you think, I don't want to be like them. I want to keep my family. I want to keep my friends. Then wrapping up here, again, with this fear indoctrination, they'll also kind of teach you that there's never a good reason to leave. Those who do are weak or undisciplined. They were brainwashed or seduced. The only right way is to stay in the group. Anything else is pretty much forbidden. And then finally, threats of harm to ex-member and family. And so again, that's more extreme, but, it does happen. So that took a little longer than I expected to run down everything, but I hope you could see that these, 44 different points with a lot of subpoints, some of them are not as crazy as you might think. I hope you could see that these 44 different points spread out into, different quadrants of control can build on each other to become insane, but some of them just by themselves seem relatively benign. That's how it usually starts out in these groups. Almost no one joins a cult when it's at, peak crazy. It starts small. It seems good in the beginning. And so I hope you can see with the amount of different levels of control here, it builds over time, which is how so many people get sucked in. And I didn't even touch on all the possible examples I could have here, but I hope that you see that these things don't just apply to, religious groups. I mean, besides an MLM, there are some really toxic workplaces that function like this as well. With all that being said, I find this really interesting, and I would like to relate back to this model in future videos as well. So I just wanted to give a rundown of the bite model. If I refer to it in the future, you could come back to this video and see what it is. And like I said before, if you find this type of stuff interesting, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, comment if you have questions. If there's something that I touched on that you'd like to know more about, leave a comment below and I'll definitely respond, because like I said, I'm a small channel, so it's not like it's gonna get lost in a sea of comments. And with that being said, I'm gonna go for the day. Also, sorry I have kind of a cold. If you couldn't tell, I was a little stuffed up. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.